We've got a totally different situation here in Washington, and we believe that what President Trump is doing is, in many cases, lawless and really beyond any norms. And that was the point of Senator Booker's speech, to try to bring that to attention. And we're in the minority. We've got 43 votes versus their 53. So it is an effort to focus attention on our point of view that this is a very, very serious situation, way different than the normal policy differences between Republicans and Democrats.
You're talking about tariffs or DOGE or the challenging the courts, or exactly, just across the board?
No, it is across the board. I mean, President Trump, first of all, on the courts, he said Republicans in the House are talking about impeaching judges because they disagree with the decisions they made when they're counter to what President Trump wants. With the legislature, the president is essentially ruling by executive order as opposed to legislation. So it's a real abdication. And by the way, in the case of tariffs as well, where I believe that Congress, because of the Constitution, has tariff authority. And decades ago, there was a delegation of national security emergency authority to a president. That this has been an overreach on the part of President Trump to use tariffs for his own negotiating tools for his own reasons. So there's a real abdication by Congress of its own authority. And one of the points that Booker made that I think is really essential, and I think all of us have to take a step back, is that system of checks and balances. All power concentrated in one branch is very dangerous, and that's what we're seeing right now with the executive overreach on the part of President Trump.
But it seems to be working in terms of the courts, and it's exactly the way it was designed. We'll see how it finally plays up. They're working through the judicial system. Some would say that he was elected to do certain things handily. You know, all 7 swing states, both chambers of Congress, obviously, and the popular vote.
I acknowledge that.
These have been more challenges, court challenges, than any of his predecessors, hundreds, or at least over 100 at this point. And you can shop it around. I mean, you acknowledge that it just sort of gums up the works. Maybe that's the way it's supposed to work. But you got to go through what would have been done immediately in terms of, I don't know, criminal immigrants that have committed crimes. You can't, all of a sudden, you're not allowed to get them out of the country. It's going to take 6 months of working through the courts to do that. Are you sure Americans are in favor of the Democrat side? At this point, Democratic approval ratings are much lower. That could change quickly, obviously, but Trump has been at new highs for approval.
But let me just acknowledge something. He did win, and we accept that. And there's a lot of policies that the president is pursuing that do have popular support. Immigration is a good example. But the issue here is not just what his policies are, or did he win or didn't he. It's what he's doing and how he's doing it. For instance, whatever the number of lawsuits are, if a court rules against the executive, then the executive has to accept that. That's been the bedrock principle in our country. And what you're seeing from some of my House colleagues and from the rhetoric of people like J.D. Vance is that if we don't like the decision of the court, we'll just bypass it. Also, on the executive orders, and tariffs is an example of that, you have a president who's asserting authority that is in overreach. Like, for instance, even on immigration, where some folks are getting picked up and then deported without any kind of due process. And it turns out that the tattoo they had was, "I love my mom." It wasn't anything related to a gang. And the administration, by the way, has admitted in a particular case that happened. That's bypassing the due process standards that ultimately serve the benefit and well-being of our democracy. So that's the challenge that we're working through. And there is a profound disagreement between the Trump administration and many of us on the Democratic side as to whether he's overreaching, even as there's some agreement that we have to do something to secure the border, for instance.
Have you got any insight into what we're going to hear at 4 p.m. today, Senator?
No, I don't. And this is another example of how the president is doing it is disturbing. He wants to return manufacturing to the United States. I'm on board with that. Will these tariffs help us or will they hurt us? You know, China tariffs are one thing. They've been ripping us off for decades, and the president is standing up to them. I support that. But Canada and Mexico, where we have this USMCA agreement that he negotiated, by the way, and has been beneficial all around, why unravel that? The Canadian tariffs are particularly troubling for me in Vermont. That's our biggest trading partner, but it's the biggest trading partner for 34 states. And I've been talking, doing roundtables with small businesses and bigger businesses in Vermont, and they see nothing but downside here. It's really going to hurt. Let me give an example. We've got a lumber industry. They export logs to Canada. They're going to have to pay a tariff to Canada. When those logs come back after being milled and they're going to be lumber for our houses, we're going to pay 25% tariffs on those. It could be like $25,000 additional cost if you're building a home at a time when housing prices are soaring, way out of reach. This just doesn't make sense, especially when we've got such good reciprocal relationship with Canada.
Senator, that's interesting. Have you heard anything about the potential carve-outs for USMCA? Do you think that there will be relief on those fronts for businesses that are operating within the constraints of that pre-existing deal?
There may be, but actually this is one of the problems. When I talk to our businesses, they want to know how can they get a carve-out, right? A fair question. Well, it turns out, I think, that it's who you know. Do you know Ludwig? Do you know Besson? So there's going to be this situation where it's going to feel to our businesses very arbitrary, and where that quality that businesses need, stability, certainty, is ripped out from underneath them. So that's another aspect of this tariff policy. Will it be arbitrary in terms of its implementation? You know, another area is on agriculture, where all of us, most of the northern states get a lot of their fertilizer, Vermont does, from Canada. And it's going to be a 25% hit. And you're already hearing the administration saying that they want to raise money to pay to farmers to offset the economic impact of these tariffs. So it really is kind of bizarre to me that you'd pay farmers from the Treasury in order to compensate for damage you'd avoid if you didn't stick the tariffs on them.
Right. Senator, we just had a chart up. How about the reciprocal tariff? It is, and it is a factual chart that shows around the world how we're, I don't know, treated or mistreated. Would you be just opposed to any of the reciprocal tariffs as well?
No, I'd be open to that if it's really specific and concrete and we're assessing what the economic impact of these are going to be. You know, what we're doing is well beyond reciprocal tariffs. We're raising tariffs on the theory that it'll result in having these jobs all come to the United States. I wish that were true. I wish it was as easy as that. But we've got these very complicated supply chains where we get the benefit oftentimes of less expensive inputs that go into cars that we might assemble here. So if it's specific, if it's thought out, and it's just making sure we're getting fair treatment from our trading partners, I'm open to that. But that's not what we're seeing out of the Trump administration. It's this, it's a big hammer that is already resulting in uncertainty. It's going to be higher prices. In my view, it's really going to cost us jobs.
Well, we don't know what we're seeing exactly yet. So I guess we'll know a lot more at 4, and it doesn't take long for a country to, to be under the new regime and to say, okay, you're right, and we've seen that start to happen already. So a lot of positive things. I don't think are you totally discounting the possibility that things like that could happen? More jobs could be brought back over, maybe not immediately, but you got to start turning this big ship around. Slowly, and this is a start, maybe.
No. Well, what you just said, the goal of bringing more jobs here, I'm for that. But there's not a thought-out or coherent policy here other than the big stick of we're going to hammer you with tariffs unless you do what I say.
It might be coherent at 4. Also, we don't know. Maybe you'll be surprised, pleasantly surprised at 4.
Let's all hope you're right, but I got to tell you right now, I'm skeptical.